So my name is Joshua Elliott. I'm a professional Spanish court interpreter. I've been doing that type of work for getting close to 9 years now, full time. So I work as a staff interpreter full time for the Kentucky Court of Justice. That's a state level position. And then I also do quite a few things on the side as well. So I teach for the National Center for Interpretation. I've been doing that now for about 5 years, and so I travel all over the place, and I teach there in Tucson with you guys as well. I also do a lot of federal work on the side, so I'm federally certified, and I travel sort of extensively throughout my state, which is Kentucky, and then also the surrounding states and even beyond. So I do a lot of interpreting and a lot of theoretical teaching, and I just have my hands in quite a bit of the activities that are surrounding interpreting these days.
So Joshua, how can you tell us, or what can you tell us about how to get started in the field? What are some of the training options for someone who is perhaps bilingual and someone who is interested in joining the field? What can that person do? What are the steps to get started?
Yeah, it's really a great question, and to some degree the answer varies, I think, a little bit from state to state. So the first thing that I always tell people is reach out to their state interpreting program, find out what the requirements are from there. There's probably a step-by-step certification process that state has. It probably entails something like an oral orientation, court observation hours, a written exam, and then the culminating final exam, there's an oral certification exam. So you just need to figure out what those steps are for your particular state. The most important part, really, in terms of becoming a court interpreter is just getting the right training. A lot of people, I think, they step back and they say, yeah, I'd like to be an interpreter. Court interpreting sounds great. And then they get into it, or they take an orientation and they find out, wow, maybe this isn't exactly what I thought it was. Maybe this isn't for me. So really, I just encourage people to get as educated as they can, to attend the trainings, attend orientations, attend trainings through National Center for Interpretation, and we certainly have some excellent trainings, and just really figure out what court interpreting is this the right career path for you, and then reach out to your state, and again, go through the step-by-step process of becoming certified. That process, it again varies from state to state, but it could be anywhere from 3 months to 6 months to a year, depending on how the state is set up. Usually there are very specific time limits, time frames associated with that certification process. And so you'll just have to reach out to that state level coordinator and really figure out what the first steps are and how to go about becoming certified. Yeah, there's a few things that you can do. Number one, again, I would first visit my state's specific website for court interpreting.
Okay.
Usually there's like a section for court interpreting within that state's normal court website. So find that. Definitely there's going to be some information that's very state specific there on that website. Another thing you can do is actually go to the website for the National Center for State Courts. The National Center for State Courts is actually, it's the entity that creates the state level certification exam that's used by most states. And if you go there, they have a section for court interpreting, and actually they administer both the state level exam and the federal exam as well. So they have links for both of those things, both of those exams. And they also have lots of resources. They have lots of information about the exams. They have training information. They have information on each state's program. So if you don't know where to go in your state, you can actually go and access your state through that website. So that's what I would recommend more than anything. Going to your state's website and then going to the National Center for State Courts. It's a very good question. It's a question that I hear a lot. Unfortunately, it's a very difficult question to answer. There is no set patterns, any specific credentials per se that court interpreters have to have. The credentials that you need to be successful are probably as unique as court interpreters themselves. So let me give you just an idea of what I have, and then we'll talk maybe generally about what I've seen in the field. So my credentials, I have a bachelor's degree in Spanish. I have a master's degree in Spanish linguistics, and then I just have, more than anything, lots of experience using Spanish in a variety of capacities. I've used Spanish in the corporate world. I was actually a Border Patrol agent for a while, which obviously has helped enormously with federal work and immigration and stuff like that. But more than anything, I think what's helped me is just trial and error. There have been times when I've tried it and I sort of messed it up, and I learned from it. And I think good interpreters just have to be able to learn from their mistakes along the way. What I've seen in leading a state-level certification program in Kentucky and interacting with the people that we've certified, what I've come to understand is that really there's no common denominator amongst interpreters that are ultimately successful. There are people who have PhDs in linguistics and are great interpreters. There are people who have PhDs that can't interpret to save their lives. There are people with absolutely no education, no formal language training at all, and they do great on the exam. And then, of course, there are people with no training at all. They can't take the exam, can't pass the exam at all. So it really just varies by individuals. So in terms of credentials and education, I try not to focus on that so much. I try to tell people that really what's important is just the person's aptitude to interpret, their ability to interpret, to learn interpreting skills, to learn language skills, to put those things together. And then there's sort of this innate sort of thing that we can't really touch, and we don't really know exactly how it works, but you might call it talent, right? And so you have to have language skills, you have to have interpreting ability, and then you also just have to have this innate talent to some degree. The good news is, people get really concerned when I say that, the good news is a little bit of talent goes a long, long way. If you're willing to put in the hard work, if you're willing to persevere, if you're willing to learn from your mistakes, and if you have some general degree of talent for languages, I think we can probably get you where you need to go. So, if you're a person who is starting later in life, and you have a degree in something else that's not Spanish or not interpreting, if you have no degree at all, if you learned your language later in life, right? If you learned your language growing up and you never had any formal training, all of that can be overcome with hard work. More than anything, what I found is just that perseverance is what is ultimately going to get you to your goal. So don't get so frustrated if you don't have the degree, if you don't have the specific qualification, right? In the end, I really think that people can be successful if they're willing to put in the work.
What are the differences between a state court interpreter and a federal court interpreter? In terms of the timelines, how long will it take, do you think, for at the state level? I would say, just on average, how much time does it take to be at that level versus the federal level?
Sure. There is quite a bit of variance from state to state. I guess if I had to say, on average, how long it would take from beginning to end, assuming that you came in the right time in that certification process, let's say you started with the orientation, you end with the certification exam, usually that's like a window of 6 months, 7 months probably. So realistically, you're looking at maybe 6 months start to end, assuming that the person passes everything the first time, assuming that, again, they come in right at the beginning of the cycle. So, 6 months, but it wouldn't be uncommon for that to go even up to a year sometimes. In terms of federal certification, the federal exam is set up a little bit differently. So what happens is that there are actually 2 exams that make up what we consider the federal certification. There's a written component and there is an oral component. And they're given in alternating years. So what happens is that 1 year you actually take the written exam. If you pass that exam, then that next year you qualify to sit for the oral exam. This year, we're currently in 2016, this year is a written exam year. So this year, participants, candidates would actually take the written exam. That exam is given usually July, August, maybe even September, somewhere around there. So somewhere around August, you take the exam. You'll get the results back a couple of months later. And then if you pass, that allows you to sit for the oral exam that next year. So best case scenario, it's a 2-year process. If you miss either of those steps along the way, let's say that you don't pass the written exam, well, you have to wait another 2 years to sit for that written exam before you can then qualify to sit for the oral exam. And after passing the written, if you get to the oral exam and by chance you don't pass that exam, that would be another 2 years that you'd have to wait. So potentially it can be a very long process to become federally certified, and that's why training is really so important. You really want to take advantage of those opportunities that come along very, very rarely, once every other year.
Joshua, what can you tell us about the future in the field? Is it a bright future for people joining the career of interpreting? What is the job prospect? What can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. My experience has been over almost 9 years now interpreting full-time, just that the need is constantly growing. There's more and more demand. Of course, what we do to some degree is directly related to immigration. And right now, as you know, we just have more Spanish-speaking immigrants in the United States than ever before. That's something that I don't see changing anytime soon. I think there's more and more need, and I believe that the need has become more spread out over the years. So whereas before it was more concentrated in, say, southwestern part of the United States, in those locations that have traditionally been Spanish-speaking epicenters, so to speak, across the U.S., that's no longer necessarily the case. And so what we have is our Spanish-speaking population really expanding and living everywhere and anywhere in the United States. And so we have all states now that have a very high demand for court interpreters. So when people ask me, is there work? Is there need? Absolutely. The key is becoming certified. Everybody wants to work with the best interpreters, and certification is obviously the way to show that. But if you work hard, if you're certified, if you have the proper credentials to work in the courts, and if you're willing to travel, willing to get out there a little bit and maybe even work outside of your hometown, work around the surrounding communities in your area, I think there's absolutely lots of work. And interpreting is really just one facet. There's also translation. There's working with other companies, not only through the courts, but doing conference interpreting, medical interpreting. There's just all kinds of stuff that you can do. Good court interpreters can easily transition, I think, into those other fields. And I see the demand growing. It's certainly grown since I've been here, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon.
How would you motivate people who are thinking about joining the field? What would you tell them? How would you summarize the career rewards, and how would you tell people join the field? It's a great option nowadays.
This career has just been so wonderful for me, for my family. It's really just been a blessing. What I would tell people is that it's extremely exciting. It's diverse. I get bored very easily. I'm never bored with court interpreting because you just never know what people are going to say. And people think, oh, they just talk about legal stuff and laws. And really, that's not true at all. We talk about everything. Court interpreting is everything. Anything and everything can come into a courtroom, and you have to know a little about everything. So it's really fascinating. One of the main, I think, pieces of advice that I would give at the beginning is just don't give up. Don't give up on your dreams. It's not easy. This profession is not easy. The tests are not easy, and perhaps rightfully so. But my experience has been that most people can find success in this career path, assuming that they're willing to put in the blood, sweat, and tears to get there. So maybe you give it a try and you're not quite as good as you thought you were, or you take the test and you didn't do as well as you thought you would and you failed the test. Well, you got to stand back up and you got to try again. And my experience has been that perseverance in the long term will ultimately get you where you want to go. So get the right training, preferably train from the National Center for Interpretation. Our 3-week program is phenomenal, and we do them also just throughout the country, so there's got to be something close to you. Do the training, get the materials that you need, and just practice, and don't give up. If things don't go your way the first time, get back up and try again.
That's great. Thank you so much, Joshua. Today we just want to thank you for your time, for your teachings, for your passion, about the field, and for all your work. And thank you so much. My name is Luis Castillo, and Joshua Elliott joined us today. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much, Joshua.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.